Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all and welcome to the channel. In this video we will actually test our API endpoints to see if the work that we have accomplished was successful. Now the beauty about this test is that we will, well actually let us delay this till after our beginning supplication. We begin with بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وارض اللهم عنا معهم أجمعين اللهم آمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. We begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful in this life and in the hereafter. We thank Him for all of His blessings that He has bestowed upon us, for they are innumerable. And we pray that we follow in the footsteps of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his fellow companions. Amen. We also ask for prayers and blessings to be bestowed upon Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers, as they were bestowed upon Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and his followers. Sorry, I have to answer this. I will return momentarily. Okay, apologies for that. I have returned. Now remember, we do not have a front end prepared. We do not have a website that the user can interact with. The purpose of that website is to contact the backend that we have created, and that backend can interact with the database, whether add to the database, modify the database, delete from the database, or retrieve from the database, and then send the response to the website for the user to visualize for the user's visualization. That is the workflow. However, as you clearly see here, we only have the backend. The front end will obviously be designed in a different language. You can design it in Java, however, I prefer Angular for front end over Java, and that is what I will be teaching you bi'idhnillah, and God willing, the Angular portion for the front end design. Then, after we learn Angular and Spring Boot, we will combine the two together for a full stack project where we will create a project from beginning to end, including authorization and authentication as well. It will probably be a university project. We could also aim for what is known as an e-commerce application, where people purchase or sell products online, similar to Amazon to a degree. And we could also cover payment with cards, or card swiping as they call it, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, and God willing. We will see what happens. Obviously, it depends on my schedule and my obligations. Okay. Since we lack a website or a front end, we will need to simulate the request being sent from the front end so that the backend sends a response or responds to that request. We will have to simulate the front end. There are two methods by which we can simulate the website or the front end. In this video we will cover one approach, and in the next video bi'idhnillah and God willing we will cover another approach, and I feel the other approach might harmonize with the students of this tutorial, mainly because of how colorful and convenient it is, but I could be mistaken. Choose whichever option is preferable for you. The first approach will be the RESTful API client. That is an application or a program that simulates a website by triggering or invoking the API endpoints that we have created. You could download Postman, you could download Insomnia, which I have pinned here. I will be using what is known as HTTPy for this lecture. It does not matter which program you use. They are exactly the same. Exactly the same. I do not know what is the difference between each program. There might be differences. I honestly do not know what the differences between each program is, but you can use any of the three: Postman, Insomnia, or HTTPy. I believe I did leave a link to download those in the setup video, but just in case I forgot, or even if I did not forget, I will post the links in the description below this video, inshallah, bi'ithnillah, and God willing. And in the second video, the upcoming video, you will see the other approach. So if you do not wish to use a RESTful API client, you do not need to do so. Okay, now for this approach, we will need to create a deletion API endpoint and a modification API endpoint. So we can test CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, and delete. I know people refer to it as update. Sometimes I choose edit or modify, but the meaning is still the same regardless. So here we will have create for CRUD. This is get all students, get student by ID. Actually, both are useful to have. Read. So what we need would be delete and update. So let us cover delete because it is easier. And what should be our... Now here it depends on if you wish to delete everything or delete a particular student. We will not cover this. This is part of your exercise, how to design an API endpoint for everything else that we did not cover. But normally you will design an API endpoint for this, normally. Unless you wish for an option to empty the database for whatever reason, then you will also use this one. Obviously, this will be under extreme scrutiny, so most likely it will be under privileged access, administrator or above perhaps. So we will use this one. We will provide an ID for a particular student and then delete that student based on the ID. So the approach will be similar to this or this. So what we can do, since we have the query parameter approach active, let us use the path variable approach for deletion. So I will copy this because it is the Zahi way all the way. And here we will say delete and then provide the student ID. Then I will copy this method, paste it here, remove the comments. This will be a boolean. We will return true or false, or you can return the student that was deleted. Obviously you will have to change the return type here. This will be boolean. Okay, and here it will be delete student by ID. Everything is set, and then here we will simply return boolean.true. It is an enum. Sorry, not an enum, it is a final variable. Well, enums are final too. Hold on, let me check. Oh yeah, it is a final variable because this is not an enum, this is a class. What we can do even further, but I will leave this for a later video بإذن and God willing, because we wish to establish a simple yet solid foundation upon which we can start building. What we can do before we return true or false is to check and see if that student actually exists. And if that student actually does exist, actually it will not be, it will be this dot student service dot, yep, this will be the method that we will invoke. So in here, what we can do before we return true is to check and see if that ID actually exists in the database. Let us say in the database we have from 1 to 5, ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then the user passes in 6 here instead. Nothing will be deleted, but true will be returned. So what we can do here is verify the input to see if it actually exists in the database. Then we can return true, else we return false if it does not exist. We will add that layer of complexity later on بإذن and God willing, or because you should have solid foundation in Java before you start this course, you can design it by yourself. But I wish to keep this till later for one reason only, and that is the GPA derived queries. I wish to show you how to design a JPA derived query. Then we will move on to the Spring oh man, I hate these stupid acronyms, JDBC named template approach. That is why I wish to leave this unfinished intentionally until we cover this بإذن and God willing. Then we can return and redesign this method. Obviously, if you design the front end in a manner that guarantees an input that is actually present in the database, you do not need to use any form of control statement. But if there is an avenue where the input might disagree with what is in the database, you should verify the input. Delete student by ID. Okay, that is perfect. We finished with delete. Now let us handle updating or modifying. I will use U for update. That way we cover CRUD. And let us see here. How do we have it? We need the ID of the student. Then we retrieve the student from the database based on the ID, modify it with the new information received from the front end, then saving the newly updated information. How about if we design it students edit, and we can use this approach? Does not really matter which approach you want. ID is equal to, and we will use the example here too. Remember, this is arbitrary. This is provided by the user in the request, hence the name request param or request parameter. It is a parameter in the request that is being received, which is a query parameter. So I will copy this, paste it here, and we can say update student by ID or simply update student. You can decide on the name, does not really matter. these are arbitrary matters, and here we return the newly modified student, not the old student that is retrieved from the database, the one that has been updated. And here we will call update student. Okay, now remember, for update we need the ID, which we are retrieving from the URL, but we also need an object sent to us through the request body. The exact same approach as the post, but obviously it will be put. And I realize I forgot to add the mapping. Delete mapping, so here we will add delete slash student ID. Now remember, we use this syntax to indicate a variable, the curly braces, so remember that, as we have done here, like so. And this will be put mapping. I know I still have to cover patch, do not worry, we will cover that later on بإذن and God willing. This will be added to us, if you recall, through this annotation. So what do we have left? We simply have to copy this part right here. And you can call this updated student if you want, it does not matter. Updated student. And there, done. We have successfully created the 4 critical pillars of APIs, or RESTful API web services. Now let us test and see if these are functioning properly. This test will also confirm if we are connected to the database properly. So remember that. If these function properly, that means the request reached the backend successfully, and the backend connected to the database successfully through this approach, and then retrieved the necessary data or modified the necessary data as intended by the request. Then we will receive the response, which is also another indication of our success. Unless we receive a failed response, then we can troubleshoot and debug. So let us test. Obviously, we cannot get anything because the database is empty, but let us test it. So what do we do here? Firstly, again, the user interface will differ between Insomnia, Postman, and HTTP, but the concept is still the same. They are fundamentally the same. You will have a bar where you are able to enter the URL or the API endpoint that we created here, and you will be able to select between the various HTTP methods. Remember, we will focus on get, post, put, and delete for now. We will cover these later on بإذن and God willing. They are slightly advanced compared to the simplistic topics we wish to cover currently. We will cover get. Let us cover get all students. Now remember, this returns a list. However, that type is for Java only. How is it serialized? It is serialized as an array, which means that on the front end, it will be converted from an array list to an array, because list is a class type for Java only. For example, if you are using JavaScript, JavaScript does not have lists or array lists, which will obviously lead to contradiction. That is the beauty of using a framework. It handles the conversion for you automatically. It takes the list and converts it to an array on the website, so you do not have to worry about any mismatches. We can Oh, obviously we need to activate the server, so that enable. We have to activate the server. If it is not active, then the website cannot connect to it. The front end has its own application server, which will connect to the application server of our project, which will connect to the application server of the database, which is why you actually need a physical component to host or store the application servers, which are called web servers. Everything is running smoothly, alhamdulillah. Okay, so let us cover getting everything. This will return an empty array because there is nothing in the database. Let us confirm this quickly. It was university here, tables, empty, as you can see here. Now we can simply copy this Zahi way all the way, paste it here. Now if I click send, this program that I am using will simulate the front end by sending or activating or invoking this API endpoint as a request. And here is where the response will be displayed. So let us click this. 200, okay, that means everything is in order. If we had 500 or 400 errors, that means there is a problem. 500 errors are related to the front end, the back end, sorry, also known as the internal server error. 400 errors are normally related to the front end. Could be a mistake in the URL perhaps, or you are trying to access an API endpoint that does not exist in the resource class. These will be under 400. Any 200 status code indicates that everything is functioning properly. I believe 400 is colored yellow and 500 is colored red. I could be mistaken, but who cares about colors? And as you can see, we have an empty array. Let us start populating the database so that we can test if everything is functioning properly. Obviously, this will not work because we do not have any students to speak of. So let us add a student. Now remember, this API endpoint requires a request body. Here, our body is empty. We sent the request with a header but without a body because it is unnecessary. The header is necessary, of course, because it contains the HTTP method that needs to map to this one right here. Now we move on to this part right here. Let us copy this. Now normally if you are using post, you will need a body. So click on post. Now we need a body, and here is this JSON? Oh yeah, JSON right here. These are the different types of serialization available. The commonly used format is JSON. I believe, from what I heard, YAML might replace JSON in the future. I honestly do not know about that because YAML is annoying with respect to its indentation. If there are issues with indentation, it will not succeed. And XML is too annoying to use. That is why it is only used for SOAP. As far as I know, it is only used in SOAP APIs. Here is where the response will be, and this is where the request we will send. So both are in JSON. The response will be presented to us in the JSON format, and we will have to enter the details in the body in JSON. Now, if you are unfamiliar with JSON, Because it is a JavaScript object, we normally begin it with curly braces and end it with a curly brace, similar to what we have here, without obviously the name of the class. We simply start and end here, and we have our object. Okay, now what do we need? We need to enter this information. With JSON, anything that is string-based or alphanumeric must be surrounded with double quotes. And remember, these fields must match what you type in here. So if this is student ID, do not use the one in the database. Use the one you typed in Spring Boot, because this will not be identifiable by your API endpoint. It will search for what is written in Java. This is inside the database. No one cares about that here. What we can do is copy this Zahi way all the way. Remember, the names must match, otherwise you will have an error. How do we set the value for this field? In JSON, we use colon, and then we put the value on the right hand side. We will use 1. What about the rest? Well, since we have multiple fields, as you can see here, we have what is known as a key value pair. This is the key and this is its value, or this is the field and this is its value. How do we write the next pair? You separate them with a comma like so, as opposed to here where we use semicolon. This will also be surrounded by double quotes. Remember, the names must match. So it is best to copy and paste. And here we can simply say Java, or actually, considering the latest developments in Syria and Gaza, I will choose a more thematic name. Alb, last name, Arsalan, I believe in English it is written as Arslan. So as you can see here, alphabetical or alphanumerical or numerical values that are strings must be surrounded in double quotes. If they are purely numerical for mathematical operations, we do not surround them with double quotes. GPA, now remember, nullable, false. It cannot be null. Let us leave it empty. We will not provide a name, just to see what happens with the response. Courses, as in the number of courses, and men take 8, not 2 or 3, as Westerners do. That is a zing, baby. Oh man, I am sorry. After the latest incidents with one of my dear friends and brothers, I distrust and despise Westerners even more than before. Now here is what Westerners do not understand. They view it from their perspective. To them, distrust and hatred equals violence, because that is what they do when they hate someone or distrust someone. They are rude to them, they are violent to them, and if you do not believe me, look at how they treat Africans. They were disallowed from riding buses, even drinking from fountains in public places. But God forbid you speak about Jews in a disorderly fashion, then you will be punished for anti-Semitism. So where was your humanity when you were mistreating Africans? Why the double standards? But Westerners are known for that. Anyways, obviously I am not generalizing. There are good Westerners, but minorities are not standards. We judge based on the majority. If, let us say, America is known for being full of drunkards, I cannot say people in America do not drink alcohol. That would be a lie. The majority are drunkards, so I will say America is a drunkard country. Yes, there are people that do not drink or are not considered drunkards, but they are a minority. Thus, they cannot be used as a standard. Now, when as Muslims we say we hate someone or we distrust someone, that does not give us the right to disrespect them, insult them, or harm them in any way. As Muslims, we are ordered by God, we are obligated by God to treat people respectfully, even if we hate them, despise them, or distrust them. That is a tenet in our religion. Unless borders are crossed, then we handle the matter differently, obviously. But let us say I distrust someone, that does not mean I will avoid eating with him at a table at work, for example. No. But when I say distrust, I mean I will not share information with you. You will not know about my private life. You will not know about my social life. Nor do you need to know that. Why? Because I distrust you. There is no shame in that. But Westerners view it as an insult, because distrust automatically means you will be rude to me, you will be unkind to me, you will be insincere with me, you will lie to me. No. They are accustomed to that because that is how they are raised. They are raised to be selfish, and thus they view everyone as an enemy or a competitor. But in reality, distrust is normal. If you meet someone online and you communicate with them for a few months, you would be an idiot if you shared your name, or pictures, or details about your life with that person. Why? Because that person will become an enemy one day. People online have no morals or principles to speak of. They will become enemies as fast as that click of a finger. I believe it is called a click. So distrust is not abnormal, and it is not a negative aspect of life. Simply because I socialize with you does not mean I trust you. I distrust you. I could trust you if you prove worthy of that trust. That is a different story. But just because I distrust you does not mean I will not joke with you, I will not treat you to lunch, I will not be generous to you, I will not be kind to you, and so on and so forth. No. Distrust means that you do not entrust that person with pivotal pieces of information, which is the prerogative of every person. If you wish to trust blindly, then you are a fool. What can I say? And when I say I hate, again, that does not mean, if I say I hate Westerners, that does not mean that I will kill Westerners as they walk by, or harm them, or disrespect them. No. I hate them for what they represent or how they behave. Not all of them, obviously. But again, speaking about majority, because that is the standard. But that does not mean I will harm them. And also in our religion, we have honor in opposition, as opposed to Westerners that would seek your destruction in any manner possible. For us, if you harm us and we are unable to obtain our right from you through justice, there is nothing else we will do about it. We will not find your personal information. We will not share pictures of you or your wife or your children and threaten them. No, that is Westerners. We do not do that because we are obligated by God, and we will be punished if we stoop to that level. We fight on the battlefield man to man. That is our Islam. as opposed to other religions. So when I say I hate or I distrust Westerners, that does not mean I will hurt you. That does not mean that I will not treat you to lunch. What is in the heart is in the heart. I am obligated by God to treat you fairly and respectfully, even if I hate you. That is our religion. Look at the other religions and see how they treat one another and they treat people from outside their religions. So do not view matters from your own perception. Understand the other's perspective. We do not care if you disagree with our perspective. Because a person could share their perspective with me and I would say I do not approve of it. Fine. But at the very least I understood why you do what you do. I can disagree with it, absolutely. With Westerners, they hate that. You must, especially if they develop a superiority complex, particularly online, also known as the God complex, where they have many followers that basically worship or revere them. When suddenly they encounter a person such as myself that holds them accountable, suddenly we are the villain of their story. No, simply I remember one of my friends received negative feedback simply because he stated that he hates the world of Lord of the Rings. It was his opinion, yet people felt as if he insulted their father, Tolkien, which apparently is Tolkien. That is stupid, but that is how Westerners are. And when I say Westerners, I do not mean geographically, I mean lifestyle and or standards. If you abide by the standards of the West, you are a Westerner. You could be Indian or living in India and still be a Westerner. You could be Russian, you could be Malaysian, whatever you are. If you abide by those standards, you automatically become Westerner. Some people may argue, well, I am Muslim, but I am also a Westerner. No. If you are a Muslim, you are not a Westerner, because we have different lifestyles and different standards than Westerners. We might share some standards, yes, but that does not make you a Westerner. A Westerner is a person that lives by the moral code of the West, not Islam. If you are a Muslim, you are not a Westerner. I just wanted to clarify that before continuing. For biography, let us leave it for editing, where we edit and add biography later. So we will cancel that as well. Now remember, if there are missing fields in the request body, their values will be null. And if they accept that, there is no problem. But if the column in the database does not accept null values, then we will have an issue. This is problematic because the GPA is empty. We do not care about biography, so it will be set to null. We do not care about that because the database does not care about that either. So what can we do here? Well, let us send the request and see the response. 500 server error. Let us see if we can find the error. I hate these stack traces. No default constructor for entity. Oh, okay. I thought I did create the default constructor. Where is it? Entity, setter, getter. What is this primary constructor? Okay, hold on. I will troubleshoot and then return to you momentarily. Okay, I have returned and I forgot to add this. No args constructor. Needs a proper and then all args constructor. OR. For goodness sake, import already. So this one is to help us with the builder pattern for these. But we do need a non-parameterized constructor. So we will turn this off, then restart it, because changes are not detected automatically using the community edition. If we were using the ultimate edition, it would detect changes automatically. There is an approach in community edition IntelliJ. If we modify certain parameters within the environment here, it can detect automatic changes, but that is not important as of now. So let us test this again. Hopefully it will give us the error that we actually need. Data integrity violation, yes. Not null property references a null value, yes. GPA, that is the issue, yes. Student GPA is not null. It is not null property, but it references, as in it has a value of null. So here you saw error 500 because this is related to the server itself. Let us modify this URL just to see the 400 error. Let us say we forgot the E. 404 not found. So error 400, or the series of 400s, is related to the front end or the API endpoints. But if everything is correct and you see 500, then the issue is in your code here. And as you saw, since I forgot to add the non-parameterized constructor, which you need, the reason I forgot about it is because I use Lombok to create it for me, but I forgot to add it. But normally you will add the constructor in the traditional fashion where you write public student like so. You definitely need this for Spring Boot, and we covered that previously, but subhanallah and praises be to Allah, I forgot to add this annotation which creates it for us. Now if we remedy the problem, the beauty about this format is the order or lack of an order. You do not need to match the order present in the entity. You do not need to match the order. You simply need to provide values to fields, and that is it. I could have student ID at the bottom here. It does not matter. The order does not matter. Since this is an amazing historical figure in Islamic history, we will give him 5.0 and then separate each line with a comma. Now, if I hit this, we should have a 200 status code. Everything is okay, and it will actually return, because remember here, we are returning the student that we create. This is a list of students. Yeah. We are returning the student that we create. So we should see this appear here in the response as well. So let us send this. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And as you can see, biography null. This is now being returned to the front end, which is simulated by this program. But if we were using an actual website, we can retrieve this data and use it in one form or another. Let us say, for example, display this data in a notification. After a person clicks save, the notification message appears and said, student with information as follows has been saved successfully, for example. We can achieve this by returning what is being saved. That is the power of the return type. Now, if we return to all, Set this to, actually let us add a new one because I can use this for the put as well. Oh, actually you should see this is an amazing feature. Watch what happens if, let us say, Muhammad the Conqueror, because we will return to our glory days soon, inshallah, bi'ithnillah, and God willing, once World War III starts. But this is a new student, but he shares the same ID with a student already in the database. Watch what happens. Oh, okay, this is interesting. Huh. Let me try this again. Oh man. Why is it functioning with the post? This should give an error that the ID, there is a duplication in the ID. Okay, let us try this again. That is very strange. There should be an error stating that the ID is the same. Student, and here we have it as the ID, which means it cannot be duplicated. And yet it does not give the error. Maybe this is related to HTTP, HTTP. Normally, if you insert different details but keep the same ID, you will have an error. I believe it is called insertion violation, if I recall correctly. I could be mistaken. But perhaps with HTTP, it disables that error and handles matters differently. But I will have to check and verify that, because in Insomnia this would give an error. I do not know why it is not giving an error here, but I can check that later. We do not really need to worry about it now. So let us try getting data. Let us get all the students. Now remember, get methods do not have a body. They only have a header. They do not have a request body, they just have a request header. So we will not use this part. No body. And then send. And here we have an array. This is how arrays are represented in JSON. You open and close the square brackets, and within each curly brace block you have the object. If there are multiple blocks, there will be a comma here and then another JSON block. Let us test this one and see if it will retrieve the student. Actually, I will put it in a separate request here. ID equal to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Oh, you see here I put 2. We only have student ID 1. So no such element. It does not exist. This ID does not exist. So if I change it to 1, and as you can see, it is not presented in an array because this is not a list. We are returning, if I can find the method, where is it? We are returning a single student, but here we return a list of students. So that is the difference. Lastly, let us cover, or actually before lastly, we have a penultimate approach, which is delete. And here we do not have a request body either. We just have this API endpoint. Now this is a placeholder, so we will delete it and set the variable here. This does not exist, so it should give us an error. or actually it should return true, but if we return to the database here, it is not deleted. That is the problem with this approach. If you do not verify the user input, there is a way through designing the front end where you limit the user to a delete button next to a record. That way you ensure that the delete button handles the ID retrieval for you. It does not require user input. But if user input is still required, you must verify it. Otherwise, you will receive true when in reality nothing happened. So let us use the actual student ID, true, but now when we check the database, as you can see, it has been deleted. And if we check get student by ID, no such element. It does not exist. And if we get all students, now it is empty again. So everything is functioning properly. Now let us create the student again. Alba Arsalan, and then send. See, now it is. So normally, this was a mistake from me. Normally we do not place this in the JSON object. Why is that? Because of this part. The student ID is generated automatically, which means we do not need to actually add this at all. It will keep incrementing from the last value. The last value in the database was student ID 1. So when we deleted that and created a new student, it will automatically increment to student 2 now. So that could be the reason why I did not have the error with mismatch in the primary key. Because I set it here explicitly as 1. So it ended up converting post to a put or a modify. So now with the student ID 2, here if I retrieve, everything is retrieved. Here if I set it to 1 now, we will have an error, but if I set it to 2, everything is in order. Let us add another student, simply to see this increment from 2 to 3. And here I will add Muhammad al-Fatih or Muhammad the Conqueror. I will keep everything else the same and send. See, now with the student ID 3, we do not need to put the ID field because of this part right here. It is generated automatically for us, as we discussed previously through auto incrementation. Now, if we retrieve everything, you see here one JSON object, comma, another JSON object. Both are objects within the array of students, which has been converted from a list of students. Because JavaScript does not have the list data type. It has an array only. Spring Boot converts it for you, so you do not have to worry about that. Now, if I change this to 3, watch the name change here from Alba Arsalan to Muhammad al-Fatih there. And here, if I delete 1, obviously, actually, let us check the database, as you can see here. So this represents the website the user uses to interact with the database, albeit indirectly. That is the purpose of a full stack application, to interact with the database indirectly through the backend, and obviously you will be limited based on permissions, roles, and authorizations. For example, you may have the role where you can read only, but you cannot create or edit or delete. This obviously is granted to you by the administrator of the project. So we have that. That is perfect. Now, what else do we need to test? We have update. Now remember, with update, we need two parameters, or we need two arguments to pass. The ID and a request body for the updated information. Now, let us open a put and copy this part. Okay. Let us edit student number 2. I wish to add biography to it instead of keeping it as null. And remember, we need a body similar to the post method. So here we will set body text, and here we will change it from null to an actual value. The leader of the Battle of Malaz. I believe in English it is Manzikert, if I recall correctly. I know its name in Arabic, but I could be mistaken with the spelling. Who wore his coffin as his armor, ready to die a martyr. In Islam, our coffin is merely a wrapping with of white, I guess you could say cloth or blanket. We call it in Arabic kafan, which is where the word coffin stems from. Kafan, coffin. We call it kafan. It is basically a white cloth that we wrap the deceased with. We do not have any fancy boxes where we place our dead, and they do not wear suits. They simply it is a reminder to the living that you take nothing with you to the grave. That is why the person is naked. Once the person dies, we give them what is called as ghusl. We wash them or we bathe them after they die, obviously. And even because dead people actually feel, they simply do not have their soul, so they cannot communicate with the living. And there was a recent publication released, a scientific publication, that actually proves that. But we have a hadith for Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that mentions this, that the living actually feel and hear, which is why cremation is forbidden in Islam, because the dead actually feel the pain of being burnt. So even when we wash the dead, we have to be gentle with them. When we move them and when we bathe them, we have to use water that is at a good temperature so that we do not bother the dead. That is one of the many beautiful aspects of Islam. And that is why the Westerners do not want Islam to spread, because they do not want such mercy upon their people. And if you do not believe me, look at how your governments treat you, and then come talk to me about mercy. Anyways, so he wore that as his armor because he was ready to die, since the odds were in the favor of the Romans. I believe it was his troops were 15,000 against 200,000 of the Romans, I believe. So he even abandoned his horse. That way, if he feels the urge to escape, he will not escape. And he wore his coffin as his armor in case he died as a martyr. People will simply carry him and bury him. Now that is a true braveheart. So now with put, we edited the body. So originally here we have it as null. So we need to pass in the updated information, which is this. So now let us send it, and here we retrieve the updated information. Why? Because we have it here as our return type. The updated student. How do we know it is the same student? Everything is the same except this part. Even the student ID. Now, if we return to all, watch what happens to this when I resend the request. And now we have successfully edited or updated an entry in the database. So we covered CRUD fully. There is one part which most likely I will cover Swagger after that video, but now that we understand this part, it is time to teach you about patch mapping. What is the difference between patch and put? Because both update, then what is the point of both? And it will also be a good opportunity to discuss item. I keep forgetting the pronunciation for that word. Hold on, I am searching for it on the dictionary. Idempotency. Yeah. Idempotency. It is a good opportunity to discuss with you idempotency, which is the critical difference between put and patch. Both require a body because we will need to send the updated information in the body. But how will this differ? We will see that in the upcoming video بإذن and God willing. And that is it for this video. I hope this lecture was helpful and beneficial to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Be safe, take care, and peace be upon you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.